I think I'd really like to share just reflections about psychedelia, psychedelics, psychedelic chemicals, tryptamine derivatives, altered states of consciousness. I must say the past 20 years have been the happiest years of my life. Scary, but happy. And over these years, I've continued to, depends on who you ask, honor or play with psychedelics. From 1963, when I left Harvard, I became very active in the psychedelic movement, and then went to India later. And met a guru. And the second day, somebody had told him apparently that I used LSD, and he said to me, "You use that yogi medicine?" And I said, "Yes." "You got any of it?" "Yes." So I brought out the bottle of this and that, and I put it in my palm, and I pointed out the LSD, and I gave him one, which was 300 micrograms, which was a good adult dose of pure acid. And he said, "Come on." So I gave him 300 more. He said, "Come on." So I gave him 300 more. He took them in his hand, and he went like that. And I, as a social scientist, said, "This is going to be very interesting." And at the end of an hour, nothing had happened at all. At the end of 2 hours, nothing had happened. Now, I couldn't believe that anybody could take 900 micrograms and nothing would happen. This is truly a miracle, a power, a siddhi. So I came back to America and I told all about this. But I had this gnawing suspicion in the back of my mind that maybe what he did was sort of hypnotize me, and he threw them over his shoulder. So when I came back to India, I found myself in his presence after some months, and one of the things he said to me was, "Did you give me some medicine last time I was here?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "Did I take it?" And he looked at me, and I said, "Well, I think so." Okay, that was that dialogue. And he said, "What happened?" I said, "Nothing." He looked at me, "Joe, go away." So I went away for the night, and the next morning I came back, came up and he said, "You got any more of that medicine?" I said, "Yeah." So I brought my medicine kit, and I had 5 pills left, the 5 pills that were 300 each. So I put one in his hand, and he took more and 2 more. He took every one but the broken one. He didn't want the broken one. He took the 4 sacred plants, and he held them, and then he took each one, and he opened his mouth and stuck out his tongue. Then he said to me, "Will they make me crazy?" And I said, "Probably." And he said, "Can I take water?" I said, "Sure." So he got water, and he drank water, and then he brought an old man over with a watch. He said, "How long will it take?" So I thought body weight, maximum an hour, my goodness. So I said an hour. So he held the watch, and at the end of an hour, nothing. And he says, "These medicines were known about in the Kulu Valley long ago." But he said, that kind of knowledge has been lost for a long time, been lost. So later, somebody said, "Is it useful, LSD?" He said it could be useful. He said it could allow you to come in and have the darshan of Christ. meaning you could come in and be in the presence of living spirit. But he said, you can't stay there. You can only stay about 2 hours, he said, and then you got to leave. He said it would be better to become the living spirit of Christ than to visit it. But he said, your medicine won't do that. He said, it's not the true samadhi. Now, I suspect that I've taken LSD about once every 2 years since I first ingested with Timothy. I've taken it many, many more times during the first 5 or 6 years. But I don't think I've missed a 2-year period. Because I always assume that I'm going to start from a different launching pad. Because all the things that happened to me in that 2 years will put me in a different space from which to take off. I'll explore a new unchanneled kind of planes of reality. And then I also feel like I'm a member of an old explorers club that has a loyalty to have reunions, you know, and so let me describe one trip to you, because that all will always convey the way what's happening to me. I've been, if I get too long-winded or anything, just stop. We'll use each other. We don't have Jeremy here. I've been a student over the years of Theravadan Buddhism, which is the Pali doctrine of Buddhism. And in the Visuddhimagga, which is one of the old texts, it describes the way as your concentration deepens by doing vipassana meditation. As your concentration gets more laser-like, and your awareness stands back from time more, you get to the point where in very deep meditation, you begin to see your own thoughts arising, existing, and passing away. Now, as Buddha pointed out, those thoughts are passing at the rate of about 1 trillion per blink of an eye. So for you to stand back far enough to see a thought come into existence, exist, and pass away means that you have gotten your mind very far back in the relation to time. Is that coming through? Can you hear what I'm saying? Anybody out there? Okay, thanks. My ego needs a lot of love, so you just got to remember that. Okay. It works basically on love. The more you love it, the more you get out of it. Okay, so there's this great description of the Visuddhimagga. The Visuddhimagga is like a thing that makes Western psychology of the human mind look kind of uninteresting, because it is so sophisticated in its analysis of states of consciousness. And then it describes how, as you get to the point where the thought comes into existence, exists and passes away, between the end of that thought and the beginning of the next thought, there is a space. And if you enter that space, you are known as a stream enterer. And that is entering into what's called nibbana, which is the field behind the form, if you will, or the field that is inherent within the form, or the field out of which the form arises. Okay, now let's shift gears. I am at the Mid-America Motel in Salina, Kansas. Okay. I have been driving across the country, and a rather secretive friend of mine has given me a bottle of LSD which sparkles in the dark. And I am on my way to Boulder, Colorado to teach with Chogyam Trungpa Rinpoche at a place called Naropa Institute, where we began Naropa that summer. And so I've got a whole trunk full of Tibetan tankas that I'm delivering to Trungpa. And I've got 3 days free, so I decide room 125 of the Mid-America Motel is my ashram, my monastic cave. And I take the tankas out of the trunk and hang them over the different things. I put a picture of my guru in the middle of the television set, turn on the picture with no sound, so it's all coming out of his head. And I have different pictures around the room, and then in the floor in front of the television set, I have important questions to ask myself, like, who are you? Things like that. Okay. Take off all my clothes, I take this medicine. And I need to go to the toilet, and I figure I got 20 minutes to sort of get everything. And I had candles and incense, and I'd push the beds aside and so on. Well, I was in the toilet, and it was like an elevator in the trade building. And I realized that whatever this was, it was more than I had anticipated. And that moment of fear of more than is a great one. I thought, what did he give me? Maybe I got the wrong dosage. I shouldn't trust him anyway. I began what you would call a bad trip in the technical language of this psychedelic movement. So I proceeded to go directly from the toilet to the door of the motel to call for help. Now, my mind then imagined a naked man rushing out of room 125, calling for help. Okay. I knew I was going to die, you see. I decided I was going to die, and so I figured what'll happen is they're going to call an ambulance, and then they're going to take this naked man and put him on, and it's going to be to there and Thorazine and questions and lights, and I'm going to die anyway, and why don't I die a different way than that way? See? So I come back inside. I just had opened the door to the chain, close the door again, come back in, and I sit down in front of the television set, and I take up a picture of my guru, and I look directly. It's a very fierce one in which he's pointing, like, stop fucking around. So that was it. Okay. And he looks at me, and I say to him, Maharaji, let me die. Figure this is as good a time to go as any. And what'll they find? I just imagine them finding the next day this man with all these little signs and this picture in the middle of the set. And I mean, these are the artifacts that are left from that. That's the message. And it seemed like as good a message as any. So I said, let me die. And I lay down and I cuddled into a fetus position. And my mind, I began to pull back from my mind, and I began to see my thoughts arise, exist, and fall away. And for moments you could focus on the arising of mind, and you could see how, like Christ says, I am making all things new. Look, all things are being made new. And you saw what it looked like to look and see the creation of all forms out of formless. There was another moment where you just saw the kind of continuity of it all. And then there was this moment where you saw it all turning into shit. Just decaying. You saw everybody turning into skeletons. You saw everything turning into liquid. It was the one where a lot of Buddhist monks commit suicide. Because you and everything you believed in and everything turns into that. It's Shiva. It's the dance of Shiva. And then I saw this space. And so at one point, I just, not by choice, I just drifted into the space. The next thought I had that I can remember was, wow, you can be anything this time around. You're free. You can do anything. Because it became so apparent to me the way in which mind creates. And I suddenly experienced myself as the creator instead of the victim. Because as long as I identify with my creation, I'm the victim. Now, what I experienced was a break in consciousness, not like sleep and not like dream and all. What I experienced was a break in consciousness. And when I came back from that, I experienced that I had not come back from nothing. And I came back very, very peaceful, very fulfilled, very present, very at home, very free. Later, when talking in Bodh Gaya in India with a meditation teacher, I merely described this experience to him. I didn't mention the LSD. And he said to me, "Oh, you are a stream enterer. You have entered nirvana." I said, "No, but you don't understand. I took LSD to do that." He said, "It doesn't matter. You are a stream enterer." And that's the way I understand that methods are methods are methods. Meditation's a method and psychedelics are a method. Methods are all traps. A method by its nature is a trap. It has to entrap you into itself in order to eject you at the end. You just hope it self-ejects. Because I've met a lot of dry meditators. "Are you enlightened?" "I meditate." "I know, but are you enlightened?" "I meditate." And I've certainly met a lot of acid heads. "Are you enlightened?" "I take acid." I know. I'm just going to tell you one story that I've just told around because it just is such a beautiful statement of what was inherent in what happened in the 60s. I was going to go much further out in this lecture, but I guess you're not worth it or something. I'll get there. Let me tell you this one story. Oh, don't mind it. It's all right. You can handle being unloved. We love each other enough to be able to handle that. Okay, this is a thing I've told in a lot of my lectures. It's so juicy. In the late 60s, everybody that came to my lectures all looked alike. They all, in the 70s, they all smiled, wore beads, and they had, I've seen it all, I've seen the light. I'm happy, And I was sort of like an uncle. This was the Godfather, and I was sort of an uncle. And I would speak on the road, and all this crowd would come, and we'd all smile at each other, and then I would say outrageous things that you only knew if you knew. And everybody would, "Yeah, we know." Well, there was a woman in the front row, and she was about 70, and she had a little hat with oranges and cherries and things on her head. She had a black patent leather bag and responsible-looking Oxford shoes and a print dress. She looked like one of your relatives. And she was sitting there, and everything I said, she went like this. And I thought, how does she know? So I'd say something more outrageous that only real heads would know, and she'd go like this. And I thought, well, she may have a neck problem, and I'm studying. Finally, at the end of the lecture, I sort of egged her on to come over, and she came over, and she said, "Oh, thank you so much. That made perfect sense, all the things you were talking about." I said, "How do you know? What method do you use that brings you into the space where you know those things?" She leaned forward very conspiratorially, and she said, "I crochet." And if I look out at my audiences these days and see the heterogeneity of the group gathered, I see that what we were a part of in the psychedelia in the early 60s and all through the late 50s and through the 60s and 70s, all of that whole process, not in itself, it's certainly television and transportation and economics and so on have all contributed, but psychedelics was one of the major forces in a shift in consciousness in this culture. And it is very, very fast becoming a massive just change in awareness, as I can see. And it's a much more heterogeneous group. It's people that come from all they crochet, and yet they know something. Something did indeed happen. There was one time in the 60s when Tim and I were working together, when I took psilocybin with Madison Presnell. Madison Presnell was a black psychiatrist. He was our doctor in residence. And Madison and I took psychedelics, and I grew up in Newton. And I was, yes, Weeks Junior High School and Newton High. And see, I grew up in a middle-class Jewish ghetto, and I was trained not to have prejudice. So I didn't have any prejudice. And when I took psilocybin with Madison, I really liked Madison. We were friends. But I was still very aware. The figure was still color. And somewhere in that session, I looked at Madison and I saw a fellow being just like me who was traveling through an incarnation that was different than mine, in which he went through wearing that costume and I went through wearing this costume, and he had that set of experiences and I had this set of experiences, and we both grew through the experiences. Everything was going fine. And it changed my feeling towards all individual differences in other human beings. It allowed me to see, to reverse figure and ground, so that I saw the way in which beings are one rather than the way in which they're many. Not instead of, but and also. And the shot in the arm that gives to one's compassion is immense. Because you can, with psychedelics, you can control states of consciousness. And you can go to the one where you look around and you see everybody as brothers and sisters. And then you go to the one where you look and you see that it's behind sexual identity and it's behind even separateness, and you see you're looking at yourself, looking at yourself, looking at yourself, looking at yourself. And there's only one of it in drag. It's the one saying, hey, let's be the many for fun. What do we do today? What'll I do today? Well, I think I'll be many. Ooh, you're scary. Ollie, ollie, in free. See, now we're the one again. And when I look at you as one, if you hurt, I hurt. And I can feel that a lot of my social action now, my anti-nuclear stuff, my planetary interests, my prison stuff, my dying project, it all has to do with my experiencing the different parts of us that feel pain. And just like you would adjust your back with a pillow when it hurts, you just start to move the energies into that area of being with it in a way that it is free to let go of the pain if it wants to. And I've had these dialogues with Dan Ellsberg just to compete with his dialogues with Gordon Liddy. It's a great minuet, I'll tell you. I mean, it's unbelievable when you think about it. Tim gets busted by, is this stealing your material? Tim gets busted by Gordon Liddy. Liddy ends up in the White House. I mean, busting Nixon. Tim and Liddy both are in jail. Tim and Liddy both end up with the same lecture agent. One creative thought, and there's a whole year of Liddy versus Leary. Liddy really busted Nixon based on breaking into Dan Ellsberg's psychiatrist's office. Tim and I were partners in this minuet. Then we turned to our corner, and there's Gordon Liddy for him and Dan Ellsberg for me. So I've been doing my dance with Dan, who's an ex-Marine captain. Okay? And Dan can't understand how I could trust that place in myself that my social action would come out of a sense of the intuitive rightness of my heart and act. Because he wants to stir up my mind with fear and urgency. And I can see from psychedelia and meditation and everything I put into myself, because my message to you today is me. I'm it. This is the datum. This is the product of whatever psychedelics is about. It wasn't an error in my life. And I can say to Dan, Dan, I don't need to scare the shit out of myself to act. Because if I act out of fear, all I am doing is perpetuating fear. And the root of the nuclear sphere, the root of nuclear threat is fear. And my actions can come out of joy and a sense of my impeccable warriorness, my intuitive participation in life. Because I noticed I had two kinds of people in my audiences. Those people who wouldn't cop to the fact that they had experienced being other than who they thought they were. You know, they said, I've never turned on, everybody's had thousands of these experiences. It's all nonsense. It's just figure ground. You treat it as error until you can look at it. So I'd have half the audience and I want to say to them, go baby, go, get loose, get high, lose a step, dance, come on, turn on. And the other part of my audience, they found that out. And they're floating out in La La Land. So, I want to say to them, come on, get your shit together, learn your zip code, get a job, clean your, Because form is no other than emptiness, and emptiness is no other than form, and form is emptiness, and emptiness is form. And to deny this world of form, this exquisite, awesome world of manifestation, of the formless into form, to deny that is to go astray, because it's God made manifest. And I'm just learning how to be a human being, and I've been through a cycle of trying to be holy and push Dick under the rug. And I can feel all these changes going on, and my days at Harvard and the days in psychedelia and the days in India, it's not an either-or proposition at all. It just all keeps summating as your wisdom deepens and your knowledge gets tempered into wisdom. Wisdom is what you are, knowledge is what you know. That's enough for the first round.